In my previous life, my sister Lily didn't want to marry the poor boy Jack, so she begged me to take her place. Little did we know that he would eventually become a billionaire. In this life, she excitedly told me, "Sis, if you could be the billionaire's wife, so can I." Watching her marry him, I couldn't help but smile. She had no idea that Jack's rise to wealth was entirely due to my strategic planning. Without me, he would be nothing. "Sis, if you could be the billionaire's wife, so can I." My sister Lily looked at me, her body trembling with excitement. Greed and desire were written all over her face, not even trying to hide it. I smirked, my smile full of hidden meaning. In my previous life, Lily didn't want to marry the poor boy, so she cried and begged our parents to let me take her place. But who would have thought that the poor boy would eventually become a billionaire? She only knew about the luxurious life I had with Jack after we got together, but she had no idea that Jack was essentially incompetent. Worst of all, Jack had a tendency for domestic violence. His rise to wealth was entirely due to my strategic planning. Without me, he would be nothing. Seeing Jack and me frequently appearing on TV, living a life better than hers, my sister was consumed with envy and jealousy, so she lured me back home under the pretext of our parents being ill, and pushed me off a tall building. As I was falling to my death, I grabbed onto her clothes, and unexpectedly, we both reincarnated to the day when Jack came to propose. Just like in my previous life, the poor boy Jack came to propose, relying on the fact that his father once saved my father's life. After entering our house, he immediately took a liking to the lively and bubbly Lily. Being quiet and well-behaved, I naturally didn't catch his eye. When Jack expressed his desire to marry Lily, she excitedly said to me, "Sis, this time you can't steal my chance at a wealthy life." I smiled slightly. "Are you sure you won't regret this decision in the future?" She was already overwhelmed with excitement. "This will be the best decision I've ever made." After saying this, she turned to our parents and said, "I'll marry him." Hearing her words, our parents' faces showed obvious concern. "Are you sure?" After all, our family was relatively well off. Although not extremely wealthy, we never had to worry about food or clothing. Marrying Jack meant a life of poverty, possibly filled with endless hardships. My sister nodded firmly again, seemingly already fantasizing about her lavish life as a billionaire's wife. Although reluctant, our parents could only painfully agree. After all, Jack's father did save our father's life, and now that they've come to propose, there was no reason to refuse. Moreover, Lily was willing to marry him, giving even less reason to decline. Throughout all this, I kept my head down, quietly staring at my old canvas shoes, a slight mocking smile playing on my lips. The greedy and selfish sister and the incompetent Jack were indeed a perfect match. Originally, the wedding date was set for the 10th of next month, but my sister was so eager to become the so-called billionaire's wife that she insisted, "I don't care, I want to marry him next week." "No, I want to marry him the day after tomorrow." My father angrily stood up from the sofa. "Lily, do you know what you're saying? Have you no shame?" My mother also ran out from the kitchen, trying to persuade Lily, "You're going to have a hard life after marrying him. The later you marry, the better. Why are you so eager to bring forward the date?" Unexpectedly, my sister raised her chin proudly, like a peacock showing off its feathers. "Who says I'm going to have a hard life? I'm going to enjoy a life of luxury. Jack is handsome and gentle. I fell deeply in love with him the moment I saw him. I believe our life together will definitely be wonderful." I smiled as I watched my sister's animated expression, imagining her current happiness. After all, when I became the billionaire's wife in my previous life, I had access to all kinds of luxury brands and frequently appeared on TV, becoming the so-called national ideal wife. At that time, she must have been incredibly jealous. My mother secretly tugged at my hand, signaling me to try and persuade her. I smiled faintly. Lily is old enough to make her own decisions now. If she wants to get married earlier, let her. My sister was so happy her eyes narrowed into crescents. After getting married, I can start building my own family and career sooner. Our parents didn't quite understand. My sister smiled and said, "I believe my future will be brilliant. Just wait and see, Mom and Dad." Seeing my sister's radiant smile, our parents could only sigh helplessly. I just lowered my eyes, unable to suppress a sneer. My sister only saw the glorious side of my previous life, and now she's eager to replace me and live that so-called brilliant life. I'm really looking forward to seeing how she plans to turn the incompetent Jack into a billionaire. As the wedding date approached, Jack's side still showed no sign of preparation. According to our local customs, before the wedding, the groom's family must give the bride some jewelry, at least a ring, necklace, and bracelet. No matter how small or inexpensive, it's a gesture of sincerity. Seeing Jack's lack of effort, my father was furious. "Is the Jack family treating my daughter like grass?" My mother wrung her hands nervously. "Yes, getting married without even a piece of jewelry will be the laughingstock of the neighborhood." I calmly watched all of this from the side. Jack's family was dirt poor, struggling even to put food on the table. How could they possibly have extra money for jewelry? My father was still regretful. If it weren't for the engagement, we would never let our daughter marry into that family. Thinking about his beloved daughter going to live a life of hardship, my father was heartbroken. My mother sighed, holding Lily's hand and trying to reason with her. "Lily, if you really don't want to marry him, we can find another way." Lily panicked and shook her head vigorously. "Of course I want to get married. In this life, I won't marry anyone but Jack." Her casual words made our parents' eyes dim with sadness. Looks like the wedding day will have to be a simple affair. Just as our parents predicted, on the wedding day, even the clothes Lily wore were hastily bought by our parents who couldn't bear to see her so poorly dressed. Naturally, only Jack came to pick up the bride. He wore a faded jacket, rode an old bicycle, and had a big smile on his face. "Mom, Dad, I brought some firecrackers to celebrate." As he spoke, he proudly placed the firecrackers on the ground and lit them. Amidst the crackling sounds, our parents' faces looked extremely unhappy. This so-called wedding was pathetically shabby. Forget about a banquet, there wasn't even a single person from the village coming to offer blessings. Even neighbor Ava, who usually gossips about everything, had gone to work in the county town as usual today. I smirked. Except for the change in the main character, everything else was exactly the same as in my previous life. The poor Jack, without any sincerity, still brazenly explained this behavior as keeping things simple. But in this miserable atmosphere. The bride was smiling brilliantly. As soon as Jack finished lighting the firecrackers, she eagerly sat on the back of his bicycle. Mom, Dad, I'm off then. Jack, looking at his new bride hugging his waist, so happy he couldn't close his mouth. Mom, Dad, please go back inside. No need to see us off. My mother opened her mouth, wanting to say something but holding back. Watching their retreating figures, her eyes inevitably moistened. Lily, how will you live from now on? My father sighed heavily and turned to go back inside without a word. Watching Jack and Lily embrace intimately, I momentarily recalled those painful memories from my previous life. My gaze gradually turned cold, then slowly returned to calmness. After all, I've been reborn now. I have a completely different path ahead of me. Those hardships will never happen to me again. Seemingly noticing my gaze on them, Lily thought I was jealous. She deliberately came to my side and lowered her voice. This was originally my life. You'd better not interfere. Sis, remember, don't appear in front of Jack casually in the future. All those good days belong to me. I nodded obediently. I couldn't ask for anything better. I don't know if it was psychological, but I suddenly felt that Lily in front of me looked much more pleasing. After all, her every word and action now deeply satisfied me. Lily was very pleased with my understanding. After all, I'm married now. In the future, stay as far away from me as possible. I nodded seriously again. Okay. Looking at my excited sister in front of me, I fell into deep thought. If I remember correctly, on the first night of their marriage, Jack would reveal his abusive nature. In my previous life, it was because I fought back fiercely, willing to risk my life, that Jack had no choice but to let it go. Later, Jack needed me to strategize for him, and I controlled most of his social resources. With me holding him down, he naturally didn't dare to abuse me anymore. In this life, I can only wish my sister good luck. Watching their gradually disappearing figures, I calmly advised my mother, since this is Lily's own choice, we should just give her our blessings. This is what she desperately wanted, so we can only wish her well. My mother wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. Emma, you're the only daughter left at home now. I held my mother's hand and turned to go back inside, but my heart felt incredibly light. When there were two daughters at home before, our parents would always think of Lily first for everything. With Lily gone, my life will only become easier and happier. I can enjoy the happiness that should come with my age, with my father's company, and never have to tread on thin ice like in my previous life. Moreover, in this life, without Jack, that incompetent fool, as a stumbling block, I'll become the billionaire myself. Firmly grasping my destiny in my own hands is the most correct choice. I still set my first goal on real estate, which I saw as the most promising in my previous life. I started organizing my initial capital. Then I invested all the funds I had into a large plot of land in the county town that nobody else thought much of, buying low and planning to sell high later. This way, my capital would multiply several times over. Then, like in my previous life, I would use the capital to register an e-commerce company, as e-commerce would become the most mainstream and profitable industry in the coming years. After planning out what I needed to do next in my mind, I also prepared to start slowly putting things into action. According to local customs, the second day after the wedding is when the bride returns to her parents' home. I was looking forward to seeing what choices my sister would make in this life. Early in the morning, our parents started preparing. My mother was busy with the food, worrying and muttering, prepare more meat dishes. Who knows when Lily will get to eat meat again after marrying into that family. My father sat nearby, heavily tapping his pipe with a gloomy expression. I'll have someone slaughter a few chickens and ducks for her to take back. As our parents were talking, there was a commotion at the door. Entering was my sister, with a bruised and swollen face. The moment I saw her, I understood. Sure enough, my sister ultimately wasn't me. She had made a completely different choice from what I did. Back then, I wanted to firmly grasp my destiny in my own hands, striving with all my might to climb out of the mud. But now, my sister had pinned all her hopes on that incompetent fool, hoping that he would somehow become a billionaire overnight. Seeing my sister in this state, my mother was heartbroken. She pulled her to sit down and started crying. Has that Jack gone mad? Doesn't he know his own situation? I've already lowered myself by marrying my daughter to him, and he dares to lay hands on her? It's only the second day, and he's already hitting her. How will the days ahead be? My father was also furious. I must teach that boy a lesson. How dare he hit my daughter? He must pay the price. Watching my father angrily speak while going to find a hoe, looking like he was ready to fight Jack to the death, my sister panicked. She quickly got up from her seat and hurriedly stopped my father. Dad, don't do this. Don't go find him. I'm not hurt at all. My father was exasperated. You've been beaten like this, and you say you're not hurt? Do you have to be beaten to death before you feel pain? Seeing her like this, even though I already knew the outcome, I couldn't bear to watch. So when our parents said they wanted to seek justice for her, I chose to remain silent. My sister shook her head with a smile. Actually, Jack is quite good to me. He wouldn't possibly beat me to death. As for why he hit me, I understand. After all, people destined for greatness have their tempers. When my sister said this, her eyes were full of deep love. Don't worry, my life will only get better, not worse. Her simple words made the air fall silent. It was the first time I'd seen someone so willing to walk into a dead end. I couldn't help but speak up. If Mom and Dad went to seek justice for you today, he might be a bit more restrained in the future. She sneered. Sis, are you jealous that I'll have a better life in the future? Are you afraid that you'll be forever trampled under my feet? I pretended not to understand, but inwardly I was extremely frustrated. As parents, seeing her like this was truly heartbreaking. My parents suggested taking her to the hospital to bandage her wounds, but my sister refused. Her reason was actually, Jack is going to be a billionaire in the future. If news of me being beaten gets out, it will affect his future reputation. In the end, our parents couldn't persuade her and could only buy some disinfectant to help her treat her wounds. It had been less than 2 days since she married, and my sister at the dining table was clearly starving. Her eyes lit up at the sight of meat, and she stuffed it into her mouth frantically. My sister, who had come back empty-handed, left with 2 chickens and 2 ducks. She even left a harsh warning. If any of you speak about what happened today, don't blame me for being merciless. Seeing her like this, I was utterly speechless.